And good morning, Newton Falls. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Lynch. I'm the city manager here in Newton Falls, and this is our morning update. We were doing these things initiated by concerns about the coronavirus, and we were doing them 6 days a week. And similar to the governor and similar to the president's task force, we have tapered down to low these 2 days a week, Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings at about 7:30. It's about a 15-minute broadcast, so you can learn some of the goings on as relates to what's happening to the coronavirus environment here in Newton Falls, and a lot of things that are particular to us. As you know, we've been providing you with information about canceled events, the way individual businesses have been operating, and how they've been coping, some of them rather creatively. As you know, Robbie Lee's has set up a very creative dining environment. Big D's is about to open soon, beginning of July, after a lot of interior construction to be ready for the new system of doing things. And we've even had reports from different officers of the government about how we are dealing here in Trumbull County and specifically in Newton Falls. But this morning, we have someone who's dealing with a business that is probably as unique as you can get in terms of making sure that they continue to penetrate to gather information and then get it out to us despite the different restrictions coming from all different forms of government and operations generally throughout Northeast Ohio. And that is the editor of the Tribune Chronicle, one of the great institutions of the Fourth Estate here in the USA, and that is the editor, Brenda Leonard. Good morning, Brenda. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Well, you know, this image I have of the grizzled editor walking into this big area with lots of desks and people working away at their typewriters or computers in the more modern sense and accomplishing all these tasks in this room full of energy. I'm sure the concept of what that room looks like or feels like has changed quite a bit since the COVID-19 came in.
Yeah, absolutely. It has. Most of our reporters, actually, I should say, I mean, it has changed a bit in some sense, but as you know, you still have to do some things in the newsroom. We still have a lot of our paginators. Those are the people that actually lay out the pages coming into the newsroom. You can't print the newspaper from home, so we still have our folks that run the printing press and that handle all of that technical stuff are in the building. But the reporters who often worked remotely anyway because they were out and about covering their stories, who sometimes would come into the building to write their stories, sometimes would be sending their stories remotely. We just don't see them as much. And so they're out doing their thing and covering their stories as much as they can. Many of them are just working from home and doing a lot of their coverage by telephone, working with their sources and things like that, just by telephone or by internet. So some things have changed, some things not so much.
Sure, sure. Do you lose, are you ever concerned a little bit about that, so that opportunity to extend your own personal leadership in dealing with some of these reporters? You picture the conferences that Ben Bradley had with folks in the newsroom dealing with important stories. There was a sense of teamwork, almost like the head coach of a football team. And I imagine there must be some difficulty, or maybe not difficulty, but an opportunity missed in terms of being able to rally your troops together when your troops are hither and yon with their laptops reporting in remotely.
Yeah, that's a good question. What we have done to ensure that we still are working closely with our reporters through, coaching them on particular stories or discussing different topics that we might want them to cover, is we have set up team conference calls twice a day in which we ask the reporters to call in and do a group conference call. and of course, we've also, we also text and phone calls and emails throughout the day. My duties and other editors' duties probably have grown a bit, just because it's a little more of a challenge, and we have to be we have to be cognizant of that, and keep in touch with the reporters that are out on the scenes, or even working from home, because as you know, it can turn into an out of sight, out of mind, and we can't let that happen.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I had some dialogue with Bob Copeland, who covers our community, is that throughout different communities, they've all dealt with the issue of having public meetings in a different way. And I got the sense from talking to Bob that there were some barriers or Chinese walls that were going up in some communities, probably without any malicious intent, but made it more difficult for reporters covering communities to get access to what was happening at their meetings and the process of what was occurring at their meetings. Have you had to develop more creative ways to penetrate into what's going on?
Well, anytime you're covering a meeting, we like to be there, and
Right.
and that's just because there's exchanges between elected officials, or even between audience and and constituents and the elected officials, that you might kind of lose that if you're not there in person.
Sure.
But more than that, we've had some concern just over making sure that the meetings continue to be open to the public, and that includes for two-way communication.
Sure.
Some of the communities were setting up. They were proceeding with according to Ohio law, that they were having their meetings, and they were still putting them online or putting them on local television or whatever it was, so that the public could watch. But in many cases, there was no opportunity for the public to call in or to have that two-way communication. And so that's something that we've been trying to push for, to make sure that, that the public has an opportunity to speak out on issues.
Sure. Well, I will tell you that we've tried every creative way to make sure that exchange goes on, and we've always had that happen. But what we did our last meeting, we're doing our next meeting as well. We have found that having the meeting closer to the way where there's a greater exchange, not just audially, but in terms of the video as well, by having the folks gather over at our football stadium. I call it a great experiment in outdoor communications or something like that. But I've got to tell you, it did restore that that sense of a town hall, if you know what I mean, Here was our community coming together, and it certainly made everybody feel much more comfortable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that is a creative way. And Newton Falls didn't seem to have any problems trying to figure out ways to allow the public to, even if they're just picking up the phone and calling into a meeting. You guys have always seemed to have done that. And it has been kind of interesting to see different communities try to work through this and find unique ways to allow people to communicate. So, in that sense, it's been good because it's made us all realize that, we're in the future, and things aren't always the way that they were, and we have to be creative and find new ways to accomplish things.
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say using new technology and, Zoom meetings and things like that. That was something that we would have never known or heard of 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things, and by the way, this is just on a personal level, because obviously we want to be as responsible as humanly possible, but I still find it jarring to look at some kind of a public discourse by a public official, someone that represents me in whatever capacity, and they appear on the screen and they're wearing a mask. And by the way, I'm a fan of the health reasons for wearing a mask, but when I see a public official wearing a mask, it sometimes deep in my gut, it disturbs me a little bit because it just gives me a feeling of, and I know it's not intended this way, but it's just peculiar feeling of lack of transparency. And I know that's not what's intended, but was it jarring for you at the beginning to see all that happening?
Yeah, I mean, it was just jarring altogether because it just seems odd. At least it did at the beginning. It's not so odd anymore, but um, yeah, I did. I understand what you're saying. I
Yeah,
remember at one point, and this is off topic, but at one
sure.
point, my husband and I were going into the bank, and I said, I don't know if I should be wearing a mask into the bank.
Yeah, right. Right. No hoodies. Keep your cell phone away, but and then people are allowed to wear masks. Yeah, I know. The part of the reason I guess I found it jarring is I kept thinking to myself, I wonder if that's the same guy at each meeting because maybe somebody else just puts on that mask and has the same kind of hair, and who knows. Anyways, well, listen, let's talk about the paper generally. You are a survivor. We know that the Vindicator sort of got absorbed by the Tribune Chronicle. And by the way, that's a good thing because that's a name that no one wants to die. But in this world, we're talking about electronic media and technology. We're still getting local coverage in this area. And how are you able to pull that off?
Um, it's there's a really, I think, a really high demand for local news, and I think that it's just a matter of managing well and continuing to do what we do well. The Vindicator had struggled financially. We also, we have the backing of a corporation, and I think that helps. I think a lot of locally owned newspapers across the country are finding the same struggles. While we are, we are locally operated. We have our management team here, and our reporters obviously are here. But we are part of a much larger corporation, and I think that helps. So we have some power buying, I guess, if you will,
Sure.
when we're purchasing things like Associated Press wire and syndicated services and things like that. So that helps. I'm just in in buying newsprint and ink and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
those things help. But we have really welcomed coverage in Mahoning County and taking on the Vindicator in our newsroom, and it's been phenomenal. We've really had good reaction, and the public has been very excited to have us. In Mahoning County, not just in Mahoning County, a lot of Trumbull County areas too.
Sure.
We have readers of the Vindicator, so it's been great. It's been a really good experience.
Well, I think that as technology has marched on, the appetite for local news isn't going away. It's just that the organizations that can deliver that in a way that's efficient, streamlined, and also get you that local news, there'll always be that appetite. In fact, I've found it a little troubling that the Plain Dealer has on a regular basis, seems like every 6 months they issue another announcement about how they're further cutting back on local coverage. And I think local coverage is a mother's milk of newspapering, and we hope that it continues, because I will tell you that the opportunity for local governments just to make an announcement about a new plant coming to town, or switching an office for the public, or offering a new service, those opportunities are getting further and fewer and far between. And praise the Lord, we live in an environment where I can pick up the telephone and talk to a Bob Copeland or the other people that are really fulfilling the definition of a beat writer. And I don't know how you find folks like Bob Copeland, but we hope you've got a whole lineup of people to be part of that process.
Yeah, I'm really blessed with a very excellent staff. We've been very fortunate to be able to find a lot of really good people, and sometimes that's not an easy task, but we've seemed to have been able to do that. And we've also brought on quite a few really good people that had worked at the Vindicator that have now joined our staff in our newsroom, and it's been really good. So,
Yeah.
like I said, we're very blessed.
Well, you've come up through the ranks. Truth be told, it's a very special form of art, isn't it? Writing on a deadline. Everybody thinks they can write. Writing on a deadline is one of the unique talents. And by the way, pressures. You know, when Bob calls me after a council meeting, it's 10:30 at night. I get it because there's a real deadline out there, and it's not for the faint of heart, is it?
No, that's for sure. And nowadays, because of technology, we constantly are under deadline because as soon as something is happening, they'll hear me or some other editor in the newsroom saying, "I need that. Give me that now, so I can get that posted for our online readers." And then they can get us a couple paragraphs and we get something posted, and then they can continue to work on the story and expand on it for the next day's paper. But we want to get something up online right away if we know of news that's breaking. So yeah, I mean it's constant pressure. It really is. And you're right. Some people do well, and some people not so well. But it's something that you just know. If you're going into this business, you have to be able to operate and write quickly and ask the meaningful questions very quickly and get those answers. And after meetings at night, it is a little even more high pressure because not only are we trying to get a couple paragraphs to put online, but we're trying to get the full story so that we can get it laid out on the page and get it to the press room, in time for deadline so that it can be in the next day's paper.
Well, the other advantage of getting penetrating local coverage is that you end up being embedded in the community. And all I mean by that is I've had occasion where someone will say, "Well, where's the Tribune on this issue?" The old theory that William Randolph Hearst could move things along in whatever direction he wanted to. Well, that's gone away. I think to some extent, because there aren't that many local outlets anymore, the fact that we consistently have one means that people have somebody they can confidently turn to, and it's been sort of a comfort to know. You want to have a local paper, you want to have local police. You're almost like one of our utilities now.
Well, I hope everybody thinks of us that way.
All right. Well, listen, before we adjourn, I do have to say one other thing, and that is that we are grateful to you because we're not a gigantic community, but we offer obviously important public services, and we are the local government connection, and you folks cover our local high school sports like a blanket. And to some extent, well, the other coverage of government and so forth is great, but that high school coverage is like a life bloodline to the community because it is so personal to people in our community that the way you cover those high school sports, I'm telling you, it provides a little charge of electricity throughout the community. I don't know how you're able to do that under these modern competitive circumstances, but it's the only place that's doing it, and you continue to do that.
Yeah, we have a really good sports staff, and we do focus heavily on local and high school sports because, as we know, people can, we do cover the Indians or the Browns or the Steelers or whatever it is, but on the national level, but those are wire stories. And we do know that, if a kid is playing a high school sport the only opportunity they're going to have to have a clip that they can keep and laminate for the rest of their lives is out of the local newspaper. And we want to definitely provide that. That's something that we really haven't touched on this morning is the challenges of what we've been doing with sports, because there hasn't been any events to cover.
Well, that's true too.
But we've been working hard to try to do stories on kids that, kind of a what would have been type stories during this past spring, and things that they might have accomplished, or what the coaches had been looking to them to do. So that's kind of sad. We felt bad for a lot of those kids that lost their whole entire season. So we're trying to continue to cover them as well as we can.
Well, as things get ramped up again in that regard, I know that the interest will peak again, but I'll tell you this much. Your high school sports coverage is the reason there are a number of subscriptions that you have in Newton Falls, almost exclusively because of that pipeline to the high school sports. So it's valuable to us. Well, that's the interview. We've covered a number of issues, certainly not as many as we could, but thanks for giving us an update as to how you're taking a special approach to the COVID-19, the way things are moving along, and if there's anything else that we can do in terms of cooperation with the Fourth Estate in Newton Falls, please let us know. But thank you to the Trib, as it's affectionately known around here, and also good health and peace to your family during these tough times, Brenda. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. You take care.
Yeah, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Brenda Linnert, the leader of the Tribune Chronicle, also affectionately known as the Trib. Well, that's another program pretty much completed, except for I did want to mention something else, more, not on a personal basis, but in terms of my capacity as a public official. And what I wanted to mention was, and this is out to my friend Rich Zemesnik, last week in a private remark that I made to my assistant, I referred to Rich, in fact, I used the term goofball, and I did not mean that to emanate out throughout the public, but because of my own carelessness, that did happen. And to my friend Rich Zemesnik, I offer my apologies. Thanks, Rich. I hope I get to see you again soon. Well, folks, that's the end of the, we'll call it the COVID-19 morning briefing anymore. We'll try to do these on a regular basis all the time. They don't cost the city anything. I emphasize that to all the folks who want to regularly offer a post about how we waste money by doing this program. It comes to you through the good graces of Tom Gregory and Gregory Films. Now, they do our council meetings on a regular basis and do cover some events on occasion for our community. We appreciate that altogether for the great things that they do. Well, folks, stay in touch with the Creator. We are slowly emerging from the COVID-19 restrictions, but please do pay attention to the governor's press briefings, which are happening at least a couple of times a week. And we'll come to you Tuesday and Friday mornings at around 7:30 in the morning for about a 15-minute broadcast. You can always contact the city manager's office at 330-872-0806. We still have masks that are in supply so that when you are in a store, in particular stores, you can take a mask with you and block those particles from emanating from your nose and your mouth towards someone else. And I think that altogether, that is also helping to flatten the curve, as they say. Well, thanks again, everybody. As I say at the end of each one of these broadcasts, God bless America and God bless the city of Newton Falls.